Sudipta. So we've heard four stories about four different organizations. The panel discussion right now would really try and consolidate or maybe extract more insights from these four stories. The panel discussion is being moderated by Professor Venkatraman, who was a corporate citizen turned academic. He's also very keen on motivating younger people like students in order to involve them in causes like social enterprises. So I'd like to invite all the speakers from the first track on inclusive business up to the stage for a discussion along with Professor Venkatraman. Um, just check with the video if they're being covered, all the six.
Good morning, everyone. We have been listening to the experts who have been, you have seen the results of their efforts. And there's a lot of learning that has come through in these short sessions. I'm sure such short sessions can't give you a complete perspective of how to run a social enterprise. But one thing is very clear from the discussions is a social enterprise is not a social service. It has to have a business approach, and as some of the speakers have said, there has to be a balance. So there has to be a balance between profitability and contribution, because there needs to be a contribution to the society out of all these efforts. And the profit part of it is only for sustainability, because the sustainability is such an important thing. And when you start such kind of entrepreneurship efforts, it's very important to recognize that you need to at least look at self-sustaining efforts from your side, at least for 2 to 3 years. There is always a gestation period, like any other business. So that gestation period is what you need to look at. Look at your strength, look at how much you can contribute to the sustainability, how you can get the kind of funding for that kind of sustainability, how to run it efficiently so that it ultimately becomes a self-sustaining enterprise. Now, some of the things which came up is, one is, as I said, look at your strength, and there was a mention about a branding which becomes very important, like any other corporate enterprise. The most important thing I can see is what you start initially gets evolved over a period of time. And then finally it probably takes a different shape, but then we should not worry about it so long as our direction, our mission is very clear. And there is a lot of need for hand-holding in this particular entrepreneurial approach, because this hand-holding is required because of the people you are involved with. And when you look at the areas, basically the rural areas, when you look at those things, the cultural aspects also come into play, because you should be careful in not damaging the cultural fabric of the society. And there is a need for empowerment in all this, so that finally they are able to run it on their own, and the hand-holding stops there. And scalability is another thing where I think you need a constant guidance on moving towards scalability, so that you create a critical mass that makes the enterprise run on its own. Now, this is basically what I wanted to say from my perspective, or my understanding of the whole discussion so far. Now I open it to the audience and the panel members for discussions. You can start your questions, and the panel members will be too happy to come out with their views on this. Thank you.
Give me some light for the audience.
stand up maybe. Hi, my name is Pallavi. I'm probably an aspiring social entrepreneur. I would like to put it that way. My question was, while listening to Mahesh and also to Sharda, it came across that it helps to have a political backup or the policy support. So do you think in terms of for social enterprises, this is more critical when you go for scaling up, or is it just as same as that for any other business, or should a person who is wanting to get into social enterprise should look at more policies and try to see if that is more supportive to building the business? I just want to open this question to Mahesh and Sharda and anybody else who can. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Pallavi. I think it's a valid question. In general, any business in India will get disturbances. Right? Any entrepreneur will agree to this fact. And more so with social enterprises simply because the number of stakeholders are large. Right? You run a factory, 100 people work, you start gauging some problem happens. 1,000 people work, definitely there will be a flag which come there. Right? That's just with the factory where you employ them for whatsoever profit-making reason. Now you're talking about social enterprise, it comes with certain baggages, if you can call so, a lot of public involved for whatever good reasons. There are capitalistic forces operating, there are political forces operating. It is good. As long as it's in smaller scale, the disturbance are less, you don't have to have. The moment you're dreaming big, you want to grow big beyond certain villages, districts, then it does attract attention. You're not saying you use political forces for your gains, but at least protect you from not getting disturbed by others. Right? And in Sharda's case, I think policies, I mean, these are law to be enforced. At least we need a lobby to talk to government to say, please enforce the law, right? And that's a valid point. There are lots of same cases we have with even organic produce. People claim it's organic, it's not really organic. And so I'm sure Sharda can share more stories on this.
Thank you, Pallavi, and thanks, Mahesh, for that insight. Totally agree with what he said. Just want to add one point which might help you. More than just the scale of the organization, right? It is what area that you're dealing with, right? Like in the case of Mahesh, what he explained is they deal with land. So the moment you deal with land, there are these land sharks, there are a lot of issues that you automatically, you like it or not, you end up with, and then that is where you will have to, at some point, take help of law, take help of government policies. And in handlooms, what we are seeing, right? We can run handlooms if you just keep away everything else. There is demand, and there is not enough produce that is meeting the demand. So actually, there's surplus demand right now. But the problem here is the adulteration. So how do you stop the adulteration is you have to get the government interfere with it. And government is, in this case, sometimes, knowingly or unknowingly doing more harm than they should be by giving subsidies to the power loom, right? So that is another thing. So whether you want handloom to survive totally depends on, whether somebody else is trying to kill it. So in such cases, you still have to engage government or policy makers and all, and it is definitely very important. Hope
Can
that
I add
helps.
something? Yeah, I think another point here is it's not that government always has a motive to harm the industry. In this case, let's say khadi or handloom weaving, or in our case, it's solar. It's sometimes the government doesn't have enough info to come up with the right policy. So there has to be a mechanism where field input has to go into policy making, and that's very important. And what we have also found is, since decentralized energy sector as a sector is very new, it's very important that people understand what are the different challenges in the field and then come up with a policy. Otherwise, what is happening is most of the policy is framed with centralized grid in their mind, so that when you try to apply those policy on decentralized energy solutions, it doesn't work. And it actually, rather than helping, it actually pulls it backwards. So that's also very important.
Yeah, hi, I'm Padma. My question is for the CCD project and especially the herbal So you had mentioned that, you're cultivating this on aggregated land or actually in the forested area?
So
And if
it's not forest area for sure. It's aggregated land, and it's a regular cultivation, agricultural land where farmers you are used to growing only paddy or groundnuts and all that. And these crops, medicinal crops, don't need any support to grow. All that we need is a land to grow. And some of them actually even they grow in shades. So they have a plantation of say coconut trees and all that. So under the coconut trees we grow tulsi leaves.
okay,
Right? Tulsi leaves don't really need much of sunlight. Right?
Okay.
And there are some other which are seen as weeds can be grown there. Right? All that we do is get quality seeds from the forest because they are virgin seeds as we call them. They are the best potency of medicinal qualities. We get the seeds from forest and grow them here. And we just started that some 3 years ago, and that's picked up well because you promise to the customer you need to give certain volume. And forest yield may not be the same always. Right? So it's definitely not destroying forests.
Okay, I
It's
understand.
sustainable.
Okay. And the another small question is about the signature campaign by Charaka. Is that an online campaign or an offline campaign? And if we can sign it today, the signatures can be taken today if it's possible.
Yeah, it is going to be an online campaign. We would urge you to get in touch with the Desi Trust and the email contact. And also we have a Facebook page. We're going to post the campaign there. We wanted to mostly travel through the social media, reach a lot of people across different parts of India. So the best way we thought would be, use the social media to do this. So it's going to be an online campaign.
We have target 1 crore signature to send a letter to Prime Minister. So before 30th. So we have an online campaign. Please vote for us, and also rural artisans like weavers.
My name is Vineet, and one thing was you mentioned about people being able to weave even at the age of 90 plus. I think that was news to me, and that can really help in terms of livelihoods for people, I thought. The other point was it might sound heartless, but you mentioned something like a competitive gap between handloom and the power loom output. So what really is the gap, and what's being done to bridge that gap?
Thanks, Vineet. So one clarification there is they cannot weave probably, but they can definitely spin yarn. That hand spun yarn, even older people doesn't need too much skills to do that. So about your question on power loom, are you asking that, why we are saying that power loom is eating into handloom? Is that the so one thing there is handloom itself, like I said, it has a certain market. There are people who are interested to buy handloom, and they're very particular about what they wear, and they have a way to support this whole movement. We are just saying that only handloom cannot be sustained also. Like, you cannot say everybody from power loom come back to handloom and you cannot meet the demand, obviously. There is a need for both, and both have their own share of market. It's only when both start to mix, which is where the problem gets created. Because if you just take handloom, you cannot meet the entire demand of all the people. So you definitely need power looms, which is faster. But what is getting lost there is the artisans, like the skilled laborers who do handwork, hand designs, and the way, the texture of the handloom. So these are things that we are losing. So we are just saying, although only 10% of the entire market is handloom actually, if you see. We just want to retain that. We don't want it to, say we want to make it 100%, but at least even in 10%, adulteration is eating up. So it's not even 10%, it's maybe like 7% or 6%, which is like slowly getting to zero very soon if we don't do this. Does that answer your question?
So just because I've been associated with Charaka and Desi for some time now, and I think the whole movement about this entire satyagraha is really about awakening the government about all the incentives that's going into the power loom. So anything that they've been doing is only reviving the power loom industry. I think that's the biggest thing that, that we have to put towards, put in front of the government. And it's not just about power loom versus handloom, but eroding that entire culture of, handloom weaving, which is what it's really resulting in. So I think that's just to add to.
Thanks, Smita.
Hi, my name is Varsha, and I'm primarily interested in healthcare and economic development at large. So my question is to Sudipto. I want to know if Selco also has initiatives where, maybe small, like maybe hospitals in like 3-tier cities which are like run by like family-run hospitals, father-son kind. Can we have, solar energy that powers up that setup? Because a large part of their cost is, because of power or energy.
Yeah, I think from a technology point of view, solar can power anything. Only thing is, if you want to power at a very large scale, the cost goes up. Energy cost is still very high because it's not as much, is not subsidized as much as, for example, thermal power for that matter, or nuclear power for that matter. So the cost is high. But what we should look at is what are the essential items in that hospital which needs power in emergency. Like if there is a 5-hour power cut, if some of the emergency machinery is there, or if you have a refrigerator which preserves vaccines, for example, in rural hospitals, if that needs power, then we should look at that, only that component, and power using solar. Then the cost is not that high. So, so it's all from a need point of view actually, yeah. But from a technology point of view, you can actually power an entire hospital or an entire institute. It's possible, yeah.
Yes, so I actually have met a couple of other solar, organizations, enterprises, but they are not social enterprises. I think they're very much just for-profit kind. So they said this could be possible, and the initial cost would be very high. So I wanted to know if there are also, social enterprises into solar, if not Selco, any others that are into this kind of large-scale.
I'm not sure how many solar social enterprises are there apart from Selco. Like of course this Honergy, Boond I mentioned, they are of course in the same similar model. So most of the solar companies will be for-profit entities who are looking more from a commercial point of view. So the idea there will be, I think, to maximize revenue, right? So people will try to sell the idea of that you power the entire hospital at this much cost. Payback period will be, let's say, 10 years or 12 years or whatever that is. But I would still say right now, looking at the cost between grid and solar, we should still look at niche areas where it is absolutely mandatory to go for solar.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Malti. So the question is, actually it's more an observation than a question, which is, how come many social enterprises don't actually invest in marketing or communication, right? While the intent is great, the objective of that intent can actually be achieved only when that message reaches the right audience, right? So either we have absolutely high-end marketing, like someone was talking about, you were talking about Ayurveda, right? Like take a brand like Forest Essentials, right? I mean, amazing marketing and amazing communication, but the prices are so prohibitively expensive that it won't reach the kind of an audience that their audience is very, very different, right? It's mostly expat kind of an audience. But a typical middle class which might want to buy, you either have absolutely no marketing, some really rustic stuff that might be available, or very fancy marketed stuff. And I'm actually a consumer of Selco and Desi, and it's almost like you don't want to sell, sometimes. Like I really had to chase the Selco guys to come and fix the stuff at my place. That's, maybe there isn't enough investment there in terms of maybe customer service or even communication. There isn't enough material available to know more about the products that you have or the services that you have. And even a Desi, right? The intent is amazing. So only if you really believe in it do you end up going to such places. But it's not things that are actively marketed to get footfall into the stores. So how important do organizations like this consider marketing and communication, and how much should, say, a budding social entrepreneur think about these aspects?
It's a very interesting question actually. This is one of the most important and critical areas in social entrepreneurship, that marketing and communication, especially when you're dealing in a segment where communication is the most difficult thing to do, is a challenge. So probably we can hear the people who have been practicing it.
Yeah, I think we need to come up with a different word compared to marketing, because when you are, means the idea I get when I hear marketing is almost like you're trying to sell your product compared to selling an idea. I completely agree with you to the point that we need to market our ideas. So what's the other word? I don't know. So I'm also using the marketing, the word market. So we need to find out ways where people feel that this is the only option available. So right now what is happening is, because we are almost invisible, that's why I asked the question to begin my talk, that how many actually knows about Selco. We are still very niche. Selco is actually quite well known that way, but I think most of the social enterprises, they are still very niche and happy in their own pocket. So what is happening is, people who are really aware, people who are ready to spend their first half of Saturday, people like you, coming here and listening to boring talks like us. So if those are the people who actually come to Selco or Desi. But apart from that, the mainstream marketing is so strong, they actually completely have wiped out our kind of organization. So I would still differentiate. I don't want to sell my product as a product. Like, I don't want to earn more revenue by saying that you buy solar, even if it is required or not required. Rather than, I want to market my idea to say that, okay, come to solar because there is a need for you and there is a benefit for you. If that need is not there, I don't want to sell my product, and that's a critical distinguishing factor for a social enterprise. And that's how it should be. It should not be like, I want to maximize my revenue, so I will ask a child to have 2 bottles of Coke every day, rather than I will not sell Coke at all. So that's the choice I think we have to present to the people. I think we are not able to present that to the larger audience. So that's a failure, I would say.
I think I would like Samit to take this, because he brought up the concept of branding in his presentation. So let's hear from him.
I didn't bring up the concept of branding, but the larger point is, I probably will have the most different opinion to what has been expressed. So I was wondering whether I should even open my mouth. But the point really is, I think we confuse a lot of things when we make the kind of statements that I heard him making. I mean, with no undue apologies on being disagreeing on that. But the point is, I think marketing and communication is fundamental, and it needs resources to market and communicate. You need a lot of money to be marketing and communicating. And if you start off with the basic premise that marketing is a negative, has a negative connotation around it, then obviously you're going to be struggling around with doing marketing and communication. I think if we really value the cause that we are doing, and if we think that what we are doing has an enormous social good that we are delivering, and if we can build sustainable enterprises around it, I don't think we should shy away from profits or to contribute enough money into marketing and communication budgets. I remember a presentation I saw on YouTube. I can't recollect the name of the person who made that presentation, but and that was not even for a for-profit enterprise. That person was talking about for not-for-profits, that where not-for-profits really fail is they don't invest enough money in marketing and communication, because somehow people who donate assume that the marketing and communication happen by itself. And then you're competing with Coca-Cola, who's throwing money all over the place, and you have to remember that you're competing for your child's attention. Right? While all of us are, for whatever the reason, maybe our DNA is right, that we seem to have an interest in some of these things. A lot of our 99.9% of people don't really care. So if you believe in the cause, let's say millets for example, and I think he mentioned millets, and if you really believe that I want to contribute to society's welfare by making millet an integral part of the diet of all people in Karnataka, and we were all millet eaters probably 50 years ago, I should not hesitate into putting money into marketing and communication. While I think social enterprises do get caught in this dilemma, what is commercial, what is not. Social enterprises are very commercial. They have to become very commercial, and that's the way I approach it. Yes, I think the value system that we bring into the enterprises, or the cause that we talk about, if is central to us, and if you get into mission drift, which a lot of enterprises in my sector have, you will probably face the consequences of it. But that apart, I don't see anything, any other way of growing other than marketing and communication, just to answer your question, that you have to do it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to address this. I've dealt with my clients, I'm a management consultant, who do what you're saying, right? Marketing, communication. And the products we deal here are consumer goods. And trust me, any product, consumer goods, the cost of goods manufactured is not even 15% of the price, right? The balance goes in marketing, people, right? Now, the reason you gave Selco or the AC product, do they have the best salesman in the world? No. I'm not even saying that other salesmen are cheating you, right? I wouldn't agree that Tata Solar person will come and install when you don't need one, right? I don't agree to that fact, right? And some of them might. The fact is you got to decouple two things. You run a business here to meet social needs, but don't expect customers to do that charity for you. The product has to sell by itself. The proposition of the product has to mean something. Trust me, Forest Essential is no different, or in fact it's inferior. I hope there's no Forest Essential person here, prospective customer for me, right? It's nowhere superior to Arvindo. Arvindo Ashram makes wonderful organic soaps, right? And there is one more which is in Gandhigram, which is made in Dindigul. They're not exactly organic, little chemical goes into it. The product is 1/5 the cost of Arvindo, but not marketed well, right? So the product has to sell by itself. Of course, it has to be communicated. Don't expect customers to give that effort, like you chase them. I don't expect the customers to chase at all. The millets example he gave, I don't know how many of you eat millets. The branded millets which we get in the market cost around half a kg, $60, right? The product is bought from the producer after cleaning. Cleaning is the most critical part of that millet because dust is very high. I think $25, $30, half kg equivalent. It's like double because they're promoting it, right? So it has to be one, decouple customer and business. Your social enterprise part is only for the profit. Where does it go back, right? Whether you want to have shareholders directly, produce a company, that's completely different from customers. Communication is important. Don't be greedy, that's all. You don't have to charge 10 times, but the customers also feel being priced, packaged well means better product, right? Trust me, it's not.
I think
and just to complete this point on Forest Essentials, right? They're expensive probably because they spend a lot of money on marketing and communication. I mean, it may not be that they're just making a lot of money out of it, and probably the fact that they're doing that marketing and communication is helping the cause of promoting those things. So these are all decisions that each company or each entrepreneur has to make. Which segment of the market you're addressing. So you could be serving a societal good on the supply side and serving a customer who's phenomenally rich, and to serve that customer you may have to spend a lot of money on marketing and communication. I don't think we should mix all of this, and sound business principles apply irrespective of the kind of organization you're looking at. A final point on this issue is the problem social enterprises face, we are facing while launching a product, is it's a chicken and egg problem. A Coke or a Pepsi or a Forest Essential has some funding behind to hire the best marketing professional to do this job, right? Now, in our case, that funding is lacking, right? So either some of us get down without salary and do this job, right? That's an investment we do. We don't have that backing. That's the only difference I would say. Otherwise, we are as good as to sell the products. We can get the resources, be it marketing or the salesperson on the front line. This only difference is fund, which is, again, we're not asking for charity. Now that's where we're going back to some investors to say, invest money on this, the model will sustain, right?
So it is difficult because investors always not, like you said, 99% of people want 10x, right? In 5 years they want 10x. That's not happening with our motive because we want to grow the business for certain other needs also. So we need to strike a balance of what kind of investors, what kind of return they want, just money, or there are some investors that social return they want. It's a new return which has come these days called social return. Wonderful. So we are chasing such investors.
So the only point I want to compliment on what he said, the challenges that he talked about on funding are there for every entrepreneur. I mean, this is not a social enterprise challenge. So you are not really, unique in facing the challenge of funding or facing up a big enterprise. So you have to man up. I mean, that's the reality. If you're getting on into an enterprise, whether it's social or a commercial mainstream enterprise, these are challenges that one has to face and address it as you go along different life stages of your organization.
I would like to kind of open up the discussion a little bit more. Like, how do you then distinguish a marketing, social enterprise marketing and mainstream corporate marketing? How do you distinguish that?
You should not.
No,
right?
Can I come on this?
Sure.
See, the difference is only this. You don't make tall claims without delivering. You deliver what you claim. So you do some ethical communication. That's the only difference. Otherwise, there's basically no difference. I don't know whether.
Yeah, I will, there's probably kind of come back to one point I would like to, leave everybody with, is that there are a lot of good commercial companies that do great marketing. And I think the fundamental premise that if you oversell or do something incorrect to your customer, even a commercial enterprise will not survive. So I think the right kind of marketing or the right kind of product development, the right kind of delivery service is relevant for all organizations. Yes, there are organizations that take shortcuts, but a lot of them usually pay the price, even if they're commercial organizations. So
yeah, I think
in terms of specifically, is there a difference between social enterprise marketing and a commercial? I think a social enterprise has a claim, or because it is also addressing a societal good, has a claim on the heart far more than a commercial enterprise. So social enterprises can significantly differentiate by pitching in the social good that they're also delivering. And people value that, and a lot of people are willing to commit their money and open up their pockets when they see that there is a social good beyond the straight commercial benefit or the material benefit that they are getting from the product. So that is where social enterprises can differentiate and gain a lot of mileage from their marketing. But in terms of what I meant is in terms of spending money for marketing and hence fulfilling your social cause, I don't think any social enterprise should hesitate vis-a-vis a commercial enterprise as long as it is serving the cause.
So you can have one more question.
That's right.
Oh, you want to say something?
Yeah, all that I wanted to say is the social angle can open the wallet for you, but not consistently. The product has to deliver. If you have the product, communicate about the product. I have two opinions on this. My opinion on don't even bring the social element of the packaging.
Right.
If you want to put a line, you add it to it, but don't expect mileage out of it. Then you are expecting a consumer to do a charity. Don't do that. Right.
I think also, if you're talking about the amount of fund available for marketing, I think we need to distinguish there also, in the sense that, for example, the Coke actual material cost is 1 rupee or 50 paise or something like that, and most of the other cost is marketing cost, probably little bit other costs. So how much do we actually spend on marketing the product?
Yes, so when you talk about Coke, you should compare yourself with United Nations. These are two large organizations that are delivering good to society. One is doing societal good, one is doing a commercial venture. When we compare ourselves, I don't think we should really bother about Coke's marketing budget. Right. When you are a social enterprise of the size and scope that we are, I think there are enough entrepreneurs who are on the commercial side who are also bootstrapping and figuring out what their marketing budget is. And obviously we can't compete with Coke, but you can compete.
Amul is an example you can take.
Sorry?
Amul.
Yeah. No. Even in my sector, I have to compete with Tata, for example. And I cannot, right now I cannot match the marketing budget of Tata. So what I'm saying is, in a social enterprise, there is also another thought. We should think how much we actually load on the product, how much marketing cost is actually loading on the product. And there, the differentiation should come.
I think what Samit said has some kind of a balance, that's what is required. And you have to probably leverage your social contribution into that, the societal benefits out of it along with your product. So I think, yeah, we'll have one more question before we close the session.
Yes. Hi, I'm Karthik. I have general questions to all of you. Before I start asking each and every person. Before coming to something called marketing, there is something called awareness which we need to have. For these social enterprises, the general public need to have some awareness. I have never heard of Selco, but I have heard of Desi because I go to Khadi products, maybe because of that. I am interested in something which we have for the medicinal plants. So I have some knowledge about that. But even being an engineer, even being in the corporate society, there is some awareness we do not get. But whereas the general public will never get about it. So I'm trying to ask a thing. Let's not get into marketing. There is something called awareness which needs to be made because of these products. As the sir told, what is the difference between the two? There they just market it, that's not delivered. But here your product do deliver what you say, but people don't know about it. That's the first question. Yes.
Okay, false claim. We do not say that corporate products don't deliver, right? They are probably as good as any other product. Two, not everyone knows a product soon after it's launched, right? So you don't have to be aware for that matter. I'm not surprised someone is not aware. Forest Essentials people did not know the next day it was launched. It took some time, and that came with awareness, product usage, whatever, right? So as long as your target segment is not aware, let's say if she's selling in Bangalore and Bangalore people who wear khadi, that's a target segment, right? Not aware of her product, then yes, there's an area of concern, right? We sell medicinal herbs to B2B customers or Dabas and Himalayas. If you are from any of the prospective customers who are not aware, then I have concern, right? So people to know your target segment in a geography and the income group or whichever segment you want to see is not aware, then it is area of concern. Otherwise, yes, it's nice to know, right? But it's not, let's say, a sin, right? Not to know things.
Let me just, I probably didn't get the exact thread of the question. But marketing is required to create awareness. I'm not able to figure out where the question is. You say you want awareness, but you should not do marketing.
No. I'm not against marketing.
So marketing is
it was all about funding,
awareness.
right?
I mean, since awareness is what you want, and if people are not aware, it's because there isn't enough marketing that has been done, and unfortunately, that costs money to do, and you'll have to figure out a way to do it as a social.
Your
concept.
products, I mean, not exactly like you. Products need to speak about themselves, right? So that's
products will speak. So the products, if you think Selco has not spoken to you because you have not been made aware of it, right? I think it is. We will live in a dreamland if you think that products will speak for themselves and all of us will be old by that time. If I have a specific problem that I need to address, and let's say that, I mean, I'm taking the millet example because that comes easily to me. If I think that millets are going to change lifestyles for our farmers, our landowners, and for people, you will not become aware of it for a long time. If I care about the cause, I have to spend money on marketing to get there. And I don't see why there is a resistance to do it. It has to be done. I mean, that is how the modern society works. In the earlier societies, they would have probably had plays and other tools to get around it. In the modern society, you will have to figure out a way to use social media. People use Twitter. Marketing is a broad concept. It's a subject as vast as engineering, right? So you can use multiple mechanisms, and all the mechanisms are justified as long as your cause is being promoted and awareness is being created.
Yeah, right.
I think it's a question of semantics here. Marketing connotation is marketing starts with awareness. You want to create an awareness, you start marketing. Whereas marketing has been understood as a kind of power selling or selling your product.
Making profit or marketing is nothing wrong in it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's basically
creating
marketing.
wealth is always good.
Yeah, I think I would agree to Sumit, right? Yeah, about there are different channels of marketing. So if you are from Bangalore and if Selco has not reached you, that's still a failure, but it's not a sin because our primary customers are located in the district, and there the way we market is we'll go through a self-help group, we'll conduct a demo camp in the evening along with the panchayat members. So a lot of the villages, districts, talukas will know about Selco. We participate in the local village fair, we participate in the Krishi Melas. So there, if their Selco also is not heard of, so that's a problem. So it is not only one kind of market. It's not only about putting an ad in the TV or putting ad in the newspaper. There can be other channels of marketing. We have to explore all the channels of marketing to reach out to different segment of customers.
Yeah. Second thing is for Desi, Charaka, whatever. I mean, it's actually a short, what to say, band of product. When I come to Khadi, handloom products, they have a very less variety of products. In case you take for for guys or for girls. So what is there any way wherein like you're trying to widen your range of products? Because definitely to compete with the modern fabric, that may not be or may be possible, I'm not sure about that. But is there any way we just have a bit of more variety which is not harming your handloom also, but still the consumer has good amount of varieties to choose for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a very good point that you brought up. Right now, since we're targeting like the middle class urban segment, and we are just targeting right now at the basic needs of the people, like what is the basic garments that they wear. But in future, we also need to look at, probably a high-end brand which will cater to specific designer wear, which is, taking a lot of prominence. And yeah, Desi and Charaka probably, they have plans to move that way. And if you look at handloom in general, there are a lot of designers now who are very aware of this cause. And they have taken up going to the villages, speaking to the weavers, and procuring the material directly from them. So there's a lot of work happening there in the handloom sector. But yeah, for Desi and Charaka, right now it was focused on this. And when we were talking about this awareness and the branding also, right? One point I wanted to bring up is very specific to what we have. We have limited stock, which can keep producing at a very uniform pace, and that is when we will actually full-fledged go into marketing and start actually doing it. It's a very good thing to do it, but we should be little wary of doing it if we are not sure we can deliver or not. So we just need to focus on quality, and we don't right now focus on bulk orders, right? We focus on those single people who travel some distance, they come to the Desi shop and they want their kurta, right? We focus on those people. So if somebody is buying in a bulk like 10 garments, it is actually a problem for us, because then we are denying the rights for somebody else who came all the way to buy one kurta. So that kind of balance is also what we have to keep in mind. So that's probably for the previous question, but for your current question, yes, that is definitely what we are also contemplating. Designer wear and all, we need to get there.
Shraddha, I think you are doing marketing. It is not that you're not actively, you're doing viral marketing, what is called viral marketing. This is what is viral marketing. So it is not that marketing is not being done, but you know that you are aware that you want to deliver what you produce, and then you have certain limitations, so you're limiting your marketing efforts, but you're doing marketing. You cannot say that you're not doing marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, maybe not large scale, because it's always a demand supply kind of a balance we need to maintain.
Well, the chair, sir, you had said that was supposed to be the last question, but seeing the contraption in my hand, the ambassadors sort of pitied me, so
if I may take the liberty. More questions, no problem.
Right. So, good morning to you. My name is Sanjay. First and foremost, thank you very much for a very, very insightful speech, and a big thank you to Hebar and the entire ambassadors team as well for a fantastic forum. Thank you very much. What I'm going to say is it's not a question. It's more of an observation, and maybe your comments will definitely help. We say that the pillars of our country is the next generation. That's the generation which will build us, and that's what which will take us to the next level where we want to go. Now, what can we do to incite these youngsters? Now, with all due respect, people sitting in this room are, they fall in old category, minus the beautiful lady sitting here, definitely. But majority of us do fall into that category. So any thoughts as to what could we do? Because these youngsters do definitely have, out-of-the-box ideas, and they really do think really great and really can come up with really creative suggestions as well. I'm sure some of the problems which we are talking about, the points which we have raised as well, they definitely will have really great suggestions and solutions as well. What can we do to incite them?
So one thing to answer your question, Sandeep, right? Sanjay, sorry. One thing is, we are also aware that we need to orient the youth towards what we are actually doing, the cause. So it's not like the youth are not interested, but sometimes they just don't know. So one program that we will be launching is that Handloom Ambassadors, which is very specific to sensitize the youth towards this whole thing, the movement, the handloom movement, what are the challenges they're facing, and why handloom is not just a garment, like why it is very important tool for a social change. So that is what they need to understand, because the youth is very interested if it is something like activism, and they would like to get involved. So we want to, in future also do some programs, and this is the first step that we are doing, launching these Handloom Ambassadors. And we are trying to contact the colleges, we are trying to contact all the educational institutions to actually make them aware, send the representatives there, and then take the message back and spread it in their colleges.
Can I add something? I think it's a very good question and a very important question. I wish I had an easy answer to that. I think I think one aspect, somebody mentioned, I think Sudipto, right? He mentioned in the course of his presentation is we need a lot more social enterprises, and we need really role models and successful social enterprises who, in essence, we need to mainstream a lot of enterprises that are doing societal good. And that, I think, will get a lot more people enthused to create their own social enterprises, if that is what the intent of your question is. Yes, it should not be viewed, I mentioned, I think, even in my presentation, that there are very few, even young ones or old ones, who really want to take enormous personal pain to, make a huge difference. But there are a lot of us who will want to make, if we know that we can make a difference with limited pain and with some amount of effort, if we are able to make enormous difference in society, a lot more people would get involved. So for the people amongst us who are not saints, I think we should try and, wherever possible, try and create mechanisms. What Hebar has done is important, I think, in that direction, is that we have to try and create mechanisms that the social enterprises get mainstream support of funders, of venture capitalists, and of the overall ecosystem. And that, I think, as we see more and more successes, we will see more and more people getting interested. I don't think it should be seen as something which is very, very difficult, and if I have to become a social entrepreneur, I have to, starve for the next 6 months and, etc., etc. That difficulty level of social entrepreneurship should come down, and we have to create that vibe and voice around it, and the support mechanisms around it.
So I'll just address the younger generation part of it. You don't have to be part of social enterprise to contribute. You can be a consumer, right? Your children, make them, at least expose them to these products. Let them choose what is good for them, but then at least expose them. They're not even aware of such. We had our own medicine, our own way of food. Expose them, create a market, and the business will come. The moment there is a demand for it, there are a lot of people like us, like you, all of you will set up a business and it will flourish. That's about creating consumer or market. Other is about expose them to different career. Not everyone has to be an engineer. I am an engineer myself, right? Or an MBA grad or a doctor. And now at least people are taking up very niche fields. This is another field. You can have a nice livelihood, be satisfied, and contribute to the society, right? Expose them to all these options, and they will choose what is good for them, and eventually what is good is what will sustain, right? All that we're seeking parents is expose them to all the options available, at least the good ones. You feel it's good, please expose them, right? Nature will take care of it.
Yeah, I think we're still kind of competing now. Again, marketing comes into picture, creating awareness comes into picture. It is not about reaching out to the customer segment right now. It is also about how do you market social enterprise when somebody is studying in school or somebody when I was in college. So, so I had to, there was absolutely no exposure for a person like me. So I had to take the route of doing engineering, then moving to IT, doing coding, the implication of which I never understood, and then coming back to Selco. So why that route I had to take? Because after 5 years into my professional life, then I started becoming aware that there are other avenues of earning a livelihood, still doing a social good. So that, I think the reason here is in the school, in the colleges, we are not exposing not only to social enterprise, we are also not exposing to people dealing with real life problem. So you are only studying and then not applying to anything. Actually, the application can be any real life problem during those studying days, and it will make a hell lot of difference. You forget about a social good or whatever that is, it can be any real life problem, apply the knowledge first, do something with our hands. We have forgotten to do anything with our hands. So then when we come out, so we are almost like good for nothing, most of us. I know there are people who are quite good even from that system also. So those people then are not even tuned to thinking about social enterprise. So we can only think about IT, or I'm not putting down IT. IT of course has its own importance. So I'm saying that mind is not broadened enough. In Selco, believe it or not, almost every other month we get one international student group from one US university or another European university, but we hardly get any student group from any Indian universities. It's not there. It's not there in the system. It's not built into the system. So I think there are a lot of people who have started to doing that. There is one organization called Purple Squirrel, incubated by IIT Bombay, who keeps bringing these students from engineering students, graduate students from around Bombay region. So, but that's just started happening.
Yeah, I think I will add to this. I mean, being in academics, I can say that some of the schools now what they do is, I can quote one institute in Bangalore, Xavier Institute of Management and Entrepreneurship. Their MBA course, they have two. One is a summer internship, and one more internship is a socially useful project, where they go to a NGO and spend 6 weeks. So this, I think, has started in a small way, but it has to take a big shape. Can we have one more question, or last question?
Hello.
I don't know whom to give.
Can I go
ahead?
My name is Suraj, and I have just started in social entrepreneurship in the Indian cow milk. So we are trying to promote the Indian breeds, Indian cow breeds, and we are just seeking out, as probably you would have in the beginning days. So my question is, first of all, my observation is that I wish the people could buy more on moral decisions than based on marketing. That would probably improve our society much more and bring about, and we are all responsible to create that market. And my question is specifically to Sudipto and to Samit. So first is Sudipto, I noticed that you mentioned about technology in your products, right? You talk about improving the spinning wheel or improving the stitching, the machine, right? So how do you bring about this technology expertise? Because we also face probably similar conditions in the rural areas, and there is no proper guidance or proper input from the IITs or these engineering graduations, right? From the colleges, they won't really contribute there. So how do you bring about these expertise? And the second question is to Samit, how do you recruit in the rural areas, or how do you recruit the right kind of people to work with you, so that they stay with you? How do you get that? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's difficult to get technical expertise to work on this kind of problem. Harish always gives this example. Harish could not come today. So we have a rural lab which is based out of Ujjire near Dharmasthala, and most of the engineers working there are white skin. We hardly get good engineers working at that salary with this kind of problem. Now the problems what we are talking here is not glamorous. It's not we're not building a Boeing aircraft, right? So it's very difficult, but the engineering challenge is as difficult as, or maybe more difficult than a Boeing. Okay, I always tend to talk a little extreme, but yeah, so it's difficult. It's always, it's a difficult problem, and we don't get those technical expertise. So how do we approach? So we try to get different sets of people. So we have this contacts with some of the premier institutes in India and abroad. And then we also have people who are hands-on, like technicians who knows how a swing machine works, or an ITI. We also kind of tend to build these resources because still renewable energy application of technology at this scale, it's still very new. In the sense it's new in an organized way. So we are trying to introduce these modular courses in ITI colleges across Karnataka, where we are training people to come to renewable energy workspace. So we get people from that institute, and then we also are always very particular about degree. I think same probably applies to DESI. So people with lot of traditional knowledge, they can contribute as good or even more when they work with a team of people who are also academically qualified. So we are trying to get the right mix of all different kinds of people.
So I have a counter question. So does that mean that you have to recruit people to get these projects, or because some of these are design issues, you don't need to like recruit people to do that. It's more of a solution which you can get from somewhere. I was looking at other incubation centers or other people who address these kinds of problems which are already aware of and you're interacting with, maybe with some colleges or institutions.
Yeah, my name is Anil Kumar. I'm an entrepreneur for the last 20 years. I would like to answer his first question. Why do you think that you don't get any support from the industry for any technological solutions? In fact, I wanted to raise this issue, but a lot of good questions were coming. I didn't want to interfere. See, the first thing what I notice is you always go to the colleges and schools or engineering students for solutions. I do agree that we have brilliant set of people in the universities who are coming out. But what they actually lack is to bring out a product and make a prototype and then bring it to the market and then see that it is ruggedized or whatever it is required to make it usable in the industry. It takes a lot of efforts. Now, I'm in industry for the last 20 years and I've always done projects for government and they have taken advantage of our skills. But I haven't come across a single social enterprise coming to us and telling their problem, say, this is my problem, how can you help us? I'll give you an example. We have outside a booth, solar booth, Kantesh, who is one of the founders. In fact, I interact with him and I was trying to sell his products in the rural area. We found that they have done fantastic products. But the problem is there are a lot of government schemes. At the same time, these government schemes are not reaching people. When you go to the villages and ask them, they tell that we hear that government is giving 20%, 30% subsidy, 50%, but where is that money? When I came back and asked Kantesh told me that, sir, we have done fantastic products, but if I really want to take advantage of government scheme and sell it in the market, the product is going to cost 2 times. I asked him why. Then he said a lot of bribes, that, this and all that. And then government has very funny norms and rules. It says that it has to be sold at so-and-so price, so they have to really jack up that and then bring down by in way of subsidies. So my question, continuing with answering to his question is, as a social enterprise, it is also the responsibility of social enterprise to bring out these problems and debate or protest, like how these viewers are doing satyagraha and all that. I'm not seeing this in the technology sector. Just few days back, there was a scheme in Karnataka government. They announced some 300 crores, and 20 seconds, all the tenders were gone. Where is that going, and how it is helping the poor people actually? So my point is, if social enterprise is capable of bringing this awareness, which that gentleman said, and then you are dedicating yourself to this cause, right? So you have a lot of time, and you can actually reach people and take the help of industry. And then interface, like he mentioned, any product that goes into the market has to be top world class. There is no compromise on that. So if you can do that, you can get these products from various industries, and industry can actually do value engineering. We have done this by reducing the cost and improving the quality, and so many things we can do it. But we actually go to the market and sell it actually. That our business is something else. If you people can provide this interface and interact, not only with the industry, even there are a lot of budding entrepreneurs who are coming out from college, but they take 1 or 2 years to really come out with a prototype, like incubation centers. So this is just, thought.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree, and that's what we do. In fact, in my slide, Selco was in the middle. So one of the partners was a technology partner, and that's where the industry comes in. So the technology, we don't have so much capacity to, for example, improve the efficiency of a solar panel. We don't do that. What we're working on is the solution. Now, if we have a technology, we have the most energy efficient motor in the world. Can we take that motor and connect it to a swing machine and power it through solar and give that solution to a tailor? So that space is very restricted. Very few people are actually working in that solution space of small scale technology, or making technology accessible to small scale farmer or tailor or a swing machine user or weaver. So that's what. So we are. I completely agree. It has to be that way only. We cannot by ourselves come up with all the products in the world and then also look at the solution. It's not going to happen. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we will close the session. I'm sure you all have a lot of
Yep.
questions. You can
Can we
ask
just
your
have
question.
it after the break, because
No, I'll just make one small statement.
Yeah,
That's
please.
about it.
Yeah.
Nothing more to it. It's not that universities and colleges are not waking up to social enterprises. I'm from PES University. I represent PES University. And we are in talks with Hebar, and I think sooner or later he'll make an announcement. We have set up a Center for Social and Economic Initiative, and this center is totally focused on social enterprises. So we're going to be doing research, we're going to be doing a whole lot of things like prototyping and things like that in this particular, this one. So Indian universities are also waking up. I mean, it's not that we are far away, we'll catch up very soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I guess the number of questions is equal to the number of people, so I think we are seeing a lot of success right away. Thanks a lot. We know you have a lot of questions still for the people here. Please do carry forward your questions during the tea break, but we really need to take a break and then start with the next session. So thanks a lot for all the questions, and thanks a lot, first of all, to the panelists for having such an stimulating discussion on inclusive business. Closing this particular track here, and just a small token of gratitude from our side, we're just going to give some souvenirs to all the panelists here. Request Hebar to please present the souvenirs. Starting from this side onwards to Maheshwaran. Thank you. Samit, Chaitanya India. Professor Venkatraman, thanks a lot, sir. Sudipto from Selco. Sharda from Charaka. And Mr. Krishna again from Charaka. Thanks a lot once again. We're having a short tea break, so basically the break is condensed because we've had such a long discussion. There's a 10-minute tea break. We have tea and coffee at two places. One is inside this auditorium at the dining section, which will be available for a short time. For a 24-hour paid tea and coffee stall, there is one just outside of the auditorium. As soon as you enter it, I mean just before you enter. So please feel free, and we'll convene back in another 10 minutes. Thank you very much.